What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Coffee and Van Chats. If you haven't already, please make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. On this episode of Coffee and Van Chats, we chat with Payson McElveen. Payson McElveen is a professional mountain biker based out of Durango, Colorado. And yeah, when he's not in Durango, Colorado, he's probably parked somewhere in California living the dream. It's super cool to get the opportunity to chat with Payson because usually our paths would never cross because our disciplines are just completely different. On this episode, we chat about his success in becoming a privateer and turning that into one of probably the most dominant mountain bike and gravel teams in the country. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode. This episode is also brought to you by Beetroot Pro. I've been using Beetroot Pro for quite some time now, and honestly, it's probably the best beetroot powder that I've ever had in my life. It shakes up super well, and it tastes really good. You don't get that earthy dirt taste like you usually would from any other beetroot product. So check them out at beetrootpro.com. Welcome back to Coffee and Van Chats. I'm here with Payson McElveen, and yeah, he's a professional mountain biker, gravel racer, and on top of that, he's an entrepreneur. I mean, I really latched onto this guy when I started seeing some of his podcasts and his content, and really, yeah, he's just out there and getting it and hustling and working hard. So, Payson, how you doing, man?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks again for being on. So, I really kind of wanted to get your take on like where you even got started with this. I mean, just for me and my background, like I started loving cycling and then all of a sudden it turned into a job one day. But if I look back, that's like 6-7 years of just hard work, waking up at 5 a.m., going to bed at 10 p.m. kind of things, trying to fit training in, meet people and make connections. So where did that kind of all start for you? Like even back when you got into cycling?
Yeah. So, I mostly rode recreationally with my dad as a kiddo. It was just one of the many different ways I played outside.
Yeah.
I was definitely into more traditional stick and ball sports. Played basketball, flag football, did track and field, ran a little bit of cross country, all that sort of thing, all through high school. And then kind of had this recurring knee injury in basketball that sort of pushed me out of that. And also during that time when I was mostly more in middle school, but a little bit in high school, were the years that Lance Armstrong was just dominating the sport. And
Oh
he
yeah.
actually lived just 15 minutes away from where I grew up. So not only was he kind of local hero, but he was, hero of all of cycling. And so that kind of kept it front of mind for me more than it probably would have otherwise. And I remember I'd always watch the day's stage of the Tour de France and then go out on our little country road and kind of like reenact it as a kid and like mimic
Yeah.
Phil and Paul's voices announcing it and be like, "Oh, I'm dropping Jan Ulrich now," and kid stuff, just acting out
No, that's awesome.
what I saw. And I always had this dream of being a professional cyclist right up and through age 12, 13, and I just kept talking about it, and finally one day my parents were like, if you want to be a pro cyclist, you should probably go try a race. And so we found a local mountain bike race just because it seemed like mountain biking was going to be a little bit more accessible for someone that had never raced.
Yeah.
And I did my first mountain bike race, and so that's kind of how I started on that trajectory. But it was never a thing where my parents pushed me to do anything. There was no like soccer mom, hardcore summer camps, like you're headed down this athletic trajectory. It was just whatever I wanted to do. And I'm not really sure why, but with bike riding, I just immediately wanted to work hard at it. And it was not, I enjoyed basketball, but I wasn't the kid that was going to extra summer camps and, hiring a secondary shooting coach or anything like that.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I just was very excited to work really hard on my own at cycling, even though I knew I was going to be the only one in my area doing it. No one else in my school did it. I grew up pretty rurally, didn't really have any, my closest friend was a 15, 20-minute drive away. Closest trail network was at least a 20-minute drive away. So there were kind of a few barriers in place that I, in hindsight, don't really know why I latched onto cycling, but long story short, I did at age 14 and just kind of ran with it. And again, I'm not exactly sure why, but started to develop an interest in the business side too.
Yeah.
And all of the stuff besides the racing part, I started to enjoy as well. I have a creative streak, I guess, that just has to get itched pretty frequently.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really love the competition, but it doesn't give me complete fulfillment. I could never be the kind of bike racer who trains and then goes home and plays video games, takes a nap, eats, goes to sleep, does it again the next day. Like, there's no way I could find fulfillment in that.
Yeah. So I
Um,
bet like sitting still during this whole coronavirus thing has been pretty hard. Like, cause like now we've niched
yeah,
off no racing.
yeah, it's funny. Yes and no. I mean, I certainly miss racing, absolutely, but I'm pretty good at making myself busy, and so I immediately just filled in other projects, and now I'm at least as busy as I would be during the race season. In some ways, the race I'm less busy during the race when there's racing because there's more structure,
Yeah.
and you have to stay a certain amount of focused on racing. But um, anyway, just I guess just briefly to finish this point, I moved to Durango, Colorado when I was 18 when I graduated high school because it seemed like this was the place to be if I wanted to become a professional cyclist. And sure enough, I showed up here and realized that wow, I'm actually not that good, and
Yeah.
had a whole lot of work to do. And this community was just so incredibly welcoming from the very beginning, and I was fortunate to get some opportunities with the big local professional development team, I guess you'd call it, the Rocky Mountain Chocolate Factory team that Howard Grotz came out of, Sarah Sturm, Teal Stetson Lee, a lot of great riders came from
Yeah.
that program. And I got a couple years with that program, which helped a lot. And then it folded when I was 21. And at that time, I didn't have I wasn't one of these U23 or junior riders who was knocking off national championships left and right.
Yeah.
I took a little bit longer to develop and fill in the gaps in my game. I think because I grew up in Central Texas and I didn't grow up in the mountains.
Yeah.
And so basically I didn't have results that would merit getting a big contract of any kind. So I basically had to like you said, teach myself to be an entrepreneur if I wanted to keep racing at a pro level. And that meant starting my own program when I was 21 and basically doing what we call privateer. And over the course of 6 months, I had to teach myself everything from writing a business proposal to how to use Photoshop to everything in between. And made it work and ended up having a really well-funded program that year. And then luckily the year after things started to click and I got more opportunities. But that year where I had to do it all myself has kind of stuck with me and gave me some skills that I use every day now.
Yeah.
And entrepreneur is a funny word. I don't know why I have a gut reaction to it. Like I get that in a way that's what I am. But for some reason I think of, a guy in Silicon Valley that wears, sweatshirts and is for some reason that's what entrepreneur comes to
Gets too
mind for me.
businessy. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just doing what I want to do and what my gut tells me might be a good idea, and in some ways just kind of follow my nose. But yeah, I guess it is pretty entrepreneurial at this point.
Yeah. No, like, and you made it sound so easy, like, especially coming from like even myself, like coming up from the ground up in the sense of trying to start my own programs, being a bigger dude. I wasn't the best crit rider, but I was a great track racer. And so like I couldn't find a team to be a part of, but then I couldn't afford to go to the races that I wanted to go to. And it kind of sounds similar to you in the sense of like, you're a great mountain biker, but there's not a lot of teams more or less that are signing riders like a 10, 12, 15 man roster, like a road team would.
Totally.
So it sounds like either you had to find money or you had to get a job and move on.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so when that clicked, I think, what would be great for this is like talk about how hard that was, the first, just getting it started. Or was it hard? Because I know for like people like me, I get messages all the time. It's like, hey man, I would love to get started doing X. How do I get started doing X? I doubt Red Bull just was like, yeah, we're down. We'll give you some money and you can start a team. Good luck, kid.
Yeah. No, not at all. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, there is no playbook. I get asked that question all the time. And to be totally honest, I have no problem telling everybody everything about how it went and how, what I did to be in the position that I am now, because I know everybody's different.
Mm-hmm.
And if it can help someone great, but I'm not worried about someone coming up and, you know, taking food out of my mouth or taking a sponsorship opportunity off the table from me, because every single, when you're creating something from the ground up, like there is no textbook. Like
Yeah.
you can't copy what someone else did and apply it to you. It's kind of like training. I mean, people ask me sometimes why I put every single ride I do on Strava with power and heart rate data, and I'm like, what is someone going to do?
Oh, that's my favorite.
Go do the
I
exact
love it.
same
Yeah.
wattage I did and then magically, you know, go win a
Win the
race? Like
race. Yeah.
that's not how it works at all. Like I would much rather people be able to see that I'm human and see that I have good days and see that I have bad days, and see the data to back that up, rather than this black box of like, holy shit, he did a 5-hour ride at 22 miles an hour. You know, what is that? Who knows what that power looks like? So anyway, point being, tangent. Um, it was really hard. I mean,
Yeah.
it literally took that year where I had to create a program of my own. I was still in college. Had a couple years in college left. Um, it was 6 months full on, blinders on, 100% focus, problem solving, one yes for every 99 no's.
Yeah.
It was just like, I wasn't going to take no for an answer. And I mean, for full transparency, that year I had an operating budget of a little under $20,000, but I wasn't really paying myself anything. Like,
Yeah.
it was enough to cover my expenses to keep this thing rolling of trying to prove myself as someone that was deserving of a real pro contract. But it also gets back to this conversation of how much of a spectrum and gray area our sport is. Like, what is pro athlete? Like, is it because you hold a pro license and you compete at a professional level, or is it that you earn some of your income doing this professionally, or are you a pro if you earn all of your income doing this? Like, it's sort of weird. And so I was racing in the pro category, but for all intents and purposes at that time, I was a semi-pro. Like, in terms of profit, I was taking home maybe
Well,
$5,000 a
what
year.
do you designate as a pro then, in that
I
sense?
don't know. I don't think it's
Yeah.
really for me to decide. Um, I personally, I didn't really feel like I was a pro until it was my profession,
Yeah.
aka I wasn't doing anything else to support myself. But again, it's not really for me to decide.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, point being, it wasn't glamorous by any means that year. The following year, I got an opportunity with a team called the Competitive Cyclist Team, which was lasted for just 1 year. That year, I wasn't really getting paid either. It's just sort of prize money and bonus sort of situation. The year after that, Show Air had a long-standing factory team, and they sort of morphed into this much bigger team that had a larger roster. And that year, I was starting to get paid a little bit more real,
Yeah.
but again, it wasn't a wage that anyone would want to live on. And so I was kind of looking to, and at this point I was still focused on Olympics, World Cup, you know, trying to go this traditional cross country racer route. And the more I learned about the sport and the more I talked to people, I realized that at the end of the day, all of this is about, like, when you get to do this for a living, it's because you're doing a job for brands. You are a marketing entity. And at the end of the day, you don't get paid to race your bike. You get
Yeah.
paid to sell stuff. And the most traditional way to do that is to race your bike.
Yeah.
Chris Froome gets paid because it's good marketing for Ineos.
Yeah.
He gets paid to win the Tour de France almost secondarily. And I think that's what a lot of people lose sight of. And so as I was starting to learn this and get more experience and do some of my own research, especially outside of the sport, I think that's one of the most beneficial things that I ended up doing was almost closing my eyes to the bike industry sometimes and just looking at other industries that seem to have it more figured out, other sports, other industries, that sort of thing. Anyway,
Yeah.
I started to realize that for this World Cup style of racing, if you wanted to have a true career, there are a very small handful of people in the United States that can race full-time cross country and have it be a real career. Because once you're outside the top 15 on the World Cup results wise, no one really cares. It's not all
Yeah.
that it's just not all that marketable. And so if you're the very best in the United States, you have opportunities because you're on that Olympic trajectory, that sort of thing. But there are so few spots there that I started to think about, well, how can I have an impact on the sport? Because that wasn't feeling satisfying for me. And then at the same time, I had this opportunity to go race this event in Mongolia called the Mongolia Bike Challenge. And I
Okay.
had this incredible experience where I raced my bike 6 days across Mongolia, had
Oh,
this
that's epic. Yeah.
had this insane adventure, won the race by the skin of my teeth, and all of a sudden got an interview in Outside magazine. And I was like, whoa, holy shit. Like, why does Outside care about this, but they could care less about USA Cycling cross country nationals? And all of a sudden the megaphone that I was given in that moment was so much huger, and sponsors started coming out of the woodwork, and opportunities were just like dropping into
Yeah.
my lap. And I was like, wait a second. And I sort of had this light bulb moment where I thought, I'm sort of disenchanted with the World Cup stuff for now. Not much in the way of opportunities are coming from there. This other style of racing that I really, really enjoy, and simultaneously more opportunities are coming. Maybe we start sort of researching and mining this. Long story short, I started pivoting that direction, started building a race program and sponsorship and all that sort of thing around that style racing. And my budget, income, all that sort of thing just went like 4 or 5x
Yeah,
over the
you actually
course
had
of
an income at this point.
over the
Yeah.
course of one off season. It was
Yeah.
insane. And the next year I won marathon national championships. And
Yeah.
that's when Orange Seal and Trek were like, hey, this seems like a pretty good program. How would you feel if we took ownership of this program that you've built, manage it, own it, build some infrastructure around it, and you can just focus more on all the other stuff you want to focus on instead of the day-to-day running of the
That's
team.
awesome. Yeah, that was like kind of my next segue. It's like now you have, because what is Hannah Fincham champ?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like both of you guys smashed Mid-South. And I was just like, man, from what I knew, this team was just you. And now you've
Yeah.
brought on like hitters from out of the woodwork. I mean, what was the teammate from Europe? Remind me his name.
Dennis Van Winden.
Yeah. And so like you have ex World Tour pros, mountain bike pros, and they're just coming out of the woodwork. And I've watched a few of your episodes, which we'll put a link in the description below, of the Orange Seal, YouTube series, which is kind of a bummer that COVID hit, because that was
I
only going to be so good.
Yeah.
But just the Mid-South episode and looking at like, it's like you guys have been a team for ages. And like you guys are like a family. And so kind of like, where did that come from? Like, where did all you guys meet?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so I mean, for all intents and purposes, like I said, I guess it was 2017, I was still running my own program.
Yeah.
Mostly, and then won nationals, and that really sort of solidified things. That's where I got on the map with Red Bull. That's where Trek and Orange Seal said, we want to take ownership of this team. And it's funny that you say you think, that was just me, or that I just run the team, because it's a very common misconception, because that's the way it was for a while. But in terms of logistics and all that sort of thing, I don't do any of that anymore. I don't book my own flights. I don't order my own equipment. All of that logistical stuff is taken care of. We have more staff now than we do riders.
Wow.
And all of that came about from that humble little program that I started. And then, it just kind of shows the difference, I guess, between a privateer program and then when the brands took ownership. And so in terms of who else is on the team now, a lot of people think that, I go around and like pick and choose and manage the team and all that sort of thing.
You're just like out in the schoolyard, like you and
yeah,
you and you.
Yeah, right. No, that's not the way it is at all. I mean, I get some input because I've been here and I've been with Orange Seal for 8 years at this point. They asked me my opinion or that sort of thing, but I don't get to choose who's on the team. I don't sign the riders. I have no idea what Hannah Fincham makes salary wise. I have no idea what Kai's bonus structure looks like. Like, all of those things are team manager managed. But in terms of how we became a family, a lot of it is just emphasis on spending time together, especially early in the year. We had a couple of different women on the team previously that didn't work out for various reasons. Some of it was just chemistry. Some of it was just difference in goals.
Yeah.
It's pretty normal to kind of,
That happens, yeah.
sort through a roster for the first couple of years of a program, I think. But with Hannah, she's coming from the Cliff Pro team, and she actually came to the team and she was like, hey, I would like a change of scenery. These are my goals. They're not quite aligning with what Cliff wants me to do anymore. And team manager John came to me and he was like, can you believe this? Like, Hannah Fincham, one of the best, hands down best in the country,
Yeah.
just like randomly wants to be on our team. What do you think? And I was like, that's awesome. Pretty sure that's a yes. And so we didn't say yes immediately. There was
Try to play it cool. It's like, yeah, we'll think about it. Yeah, we need to fix that immediately.
Yeah, it's like, it's like dating. You don't want to
Yeah.
come across as too eager too soon. But
Yes.
Point being, we had some little get-togethers to get to know her better and realize that the chemistry was there. And so that's important to make it feel like a family. And then we have these big team camps that are more, they're less training camp and more about getting on the same page, getting to know each other. A full spectrum of emotions in those things too. We'll be having the time of our lives and laughing about some, playing pool one night, and then another night there'll be tears where we're having heart to hearts, and everything that a family does have, we try to not create,
awesome.
but just give the opportunity to come to fruition. So I guess that's where that family dynamic comes from. And Dennis was, just quickly on that, Dennis was another sort of random thing where he was pretty done with the world tour thing because he was honestly just tired of getting really hurt in crashes. And he's still pretty young. I think he's 31 in his prime.
Yeah.
Absolute monster of a bike rider. I mean, he's so funny. He said, you may not know my career because I have never won big race, but there was one year I went into Arenberg Forest first and I left Arenberg Forest first. For those that don't know, Paris-Roubaix has this most notorious section of cobbles called the Arenberg Forest, and it's where everything just explodes. And I guess one year when he was on Rabobank, it was his job to take care of his leader, and he went into Arenberg Forest first, left Arenberg Forest first. He was very proud of that. But point being,
That's
the
awesome.
dude has seen a lot. And you mentioned Mid-South earlier, and he was so pivotal to success there. But he just wanted a change of scenery. He saw the explosion of gravel and same sort of thing. He came to the team and said, hey, what do you think? And the team was like, yep, that sounds good.
We'll still play it cool. We'll get back to you. Just don't make any other decisions. We're still playing it cool here. But yeah, so it's kind of to segue a little bit into Mid-South. It was one race of the year. Yeah, you're undefeated. That's kind of lame, unfortunately, but you're undefeated right now. That's unheard of in cycling, so we can kind of joke about it on the women's side and the men's side. But post Mid-South, so I did Mid-South, and I've talked about it several times on this podcast already where, I had bike issues, and I can make all these complaints. But I think, dude, the winner had bike issues from what I've heard in a recent podcast with you, where it was just or it was an article or something. But one comment you said that really stuck out to me that I wanted to touch on was that if you had to get off your bike, you were running.
Mm-hmm.
What was your thought process in that? How was that? Kind of give us a little feedback on that.
Yeah. So obviously, that was one of the more unique races I think many of us have ever done.
Yeah.
A few things. For one, I was in a different headspace for that one. Typically, I'm someone that races out of happiness and just the joy of competition and health and all that sort of thing. But that weekend, I was in a very different headspace because a good friend of mine and very important person for the mountain bike community and Durango community was hit and killed by a car not too long previously. Honestly, one of the biggest names in North American mountain biking, Ben Sontag. And so I almost didn't go to the race. His service was the same weekend. And I actually had decided to go to the service instead of do the race.
Yeah.
And some of his friends that were closest to him really urged me to race, basically saying that that's what he would have done and would want me to do. And so somewhat grudgingly, I went to the race. But kind of the upshot of that is when I got to the race, I was like, it doesn't really matter what the result is, but if you don't ride as hard as you ever have and you don't give everything you possibly ever have and you don't ride for the both of you this weekend, then what are you doing? And so my motivation came from a very different place that weekend, and I was very focused, and I wasn't focused on, like, people talk about pressure when you're because I won the year before, and people are like, do you feel the pressure, that sort of thing. I don't feel any pressure when it's an event like that. It's not like a national championship where you might lose the jersey.
Yeah.
I mean, you're familiar with that.
No, for
that
sure.
that there is more pressure, I feel. With this, it's just another opportunity to get a good result. So I didn't feel any pressure from that sense, but I felt a huge amount of pressure internally. And so I just wanted to go out and give 100%, and that was the only goal.
Yeah.
If that was 11th place, fine.
It was 11th place. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that mindset carried over into your question of why did I say I was always going to run? And it was just a matter of a mindset thing. In the scheme of things, running with 30-pound mud shoes on,
Maybe
is
even heavier.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it
probably
was
not.
insane.
It's probably not even really that faster than like power walking.
Yeah.
But it was a mindset thing. You're in a
Yeah.
race, and when you're racing, whatever, whether it's cyclocross, whether it's a running race, whatever it is, you run.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be 100% committed to that mindset of racing from wire to wire. And so that's why I made that rule for myself of just don't walk a single step.
No, yeah, that was epic. Yeah, because that's one thing that is literally like, since I messaged you, I was like, I gotta ask him, man, because like that race was the hardest thing I've ever done. Like,
Yeah.
I always tell people it's like the longest 100 miles I've ever done, and people look at me like, oh, what? It's just muddy. It's like, dude, my bike weighed like what felt like 50 pounds, and then to see Hannah, if you guys don't know who Hannah Finchamp is, like she's like probably the size of my hand. She's very small, but she's super powerful, and her bike had to weigh more than it was almost like half her body weight. Like it was insane. So yeah, to see you guys like dominate that race, and it was unreal. But yeah, so now, you know, you've been running a podcast for about a year now, which we kind of chatted about, but what I've latched onto is your quarantine companion. I think it's super cool. It brings a new flair because it's just like 4 friends, however many people at the time. It's you and Justin, and you kind of are like different personalities in your own right. Like you like Chacos, he loves Jordans. And I'm not saying that you don't love Jordans, but the Chacos, man, that cracks me up because there's no way Justin's on board with that.
No.
But like the personalities that you guys have brought to this episode, it's literally like 3 friends talking. So like, where did that stem from? And where were you guys like, hey, we need to do this? Because it looked like something that you guys have been working on even before quarantine.
Yeah, good question. Well, sort of. It started when I was in LA in January, I want to say, and we were doing this training camp. 3 of us. It was Colin Strickland, Kate Courtney, and myself, and we had an Airbnb together. And we were just doing this little training camp, and Justin lives in the area, and so one day we went for a coffee shop ride together. We all had a recovery ride, and then we were like, hey man, you want to join us for dinner? And so he joined us for dinner. And then I was like, Justin, we've been trying to get you on the podcast forever. It's kind of late, but are you willing to sit down and record? And so we were in this Airbnb, and Justin and I started recording, and Colin and Kate were sitting in the living room too. And at one point, Kate was kind of like, hey, I have a question. Like, am I allowed to jump in here? And I was like, yes, Kate Courtney, you can have a celeb shot. You can have a celeb shot on this podcast. And before you know it, we had this 4-person roundtable discussion going.
That's awesome.
And it was this amazing scenario where we had nothing planned. But I mean, Colin Strickland, winner of Kansas, Kate Courtney, mountain bike world champion, Justin Williams, everything that he brings to the table. We all came from kind of different backgrounds. We just had awesome chemistry. And what I noticed was Justin kind of started to facilitate in a way. And I almost just like put down my mic. I did put down my mic. I gave it to Kate, and I was just, hands off, just kind of watching. And I was like, this is the sweetest accident ever in podcasting. Like, I'm so stoked right now. And then Justin kind of made the comment, or I can't remember if it was Justin or me, but we both agreed. We're like, man, co-hosting would be sweet because Justin brings a lot of charisma, a lot of experience. He's very savvy in front of a camera and mic. And we just decided right then and there that at some point it would be cool to co-host. We didn't really know how that would happen because predominantly I live in Durango. He lives in LA. I spend a lot of time in LA these days, but not enough. And then quarantine happened, and we were like, well, we have to record over Zoom. This is the chance, like this is the opportunity. Justin, do you want to be the official co-host of this Zoom-based series? And that was that.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I mean, so we did a podcast with, or I guess I did a podcast with Chloe, and I know Chloe pretty well, and it was so funny to kind of even just hear her, like knowing her super well on your guys' podcast.
That was hilarious,
dude. Like, so just a quick Chloe story. When she talks about never losing, like that's a serious thing. Like it's a real thing. We're on our way to the track in Belarus, and we're walking, and she like all of a sudden wants to do this running race. I don't know where it stemmed from. I don't know where we got it. I think I made I was joking. I was like, I beat you. And she's like, no, you didn't. And I was like, yeah, I beat you. And then we ran, and God, I'm going to get shunned for this. I actually did beat her this time. And then the
dude,
next day,
you can't ever beat Chloe at anything.
I know, and I can't say it. And honestly, this podcast is probably going to get taken down, and I'm going to go missing. But I did beat her. And then the next time, or it was within on the way back from the track or something, we start running again, and she's got a lead. And I'm like, no, I still got this. Like the second gear is going to kick in. She takes her track bag, helmet, chain rings, like clothes, shoes, straight in the gut. I was down for the count. And I was like,
no way.
100%. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. It was game over. And I was just like, okay, you win. I'm done. Not doing it. Doing it.
She's one of a kind.
Yeah. She's probably going to want to get back on the podcast just to correct this whole conversation and give her stance. But yeah, it was a bit intense.
That's amazing.
But anyways, I don't want to keep you all morning. So one thing before you leave, I just want to know, like, hey, what are you doing in quarantine, or well, not in quarantine, but just, relaxing at home right now to prep, I guess, for either next season or whatever races to come?
Yeah. Well, right now, I'm actually taking time off the bike, unfortunately. I developed this weird chest thing. I've kind of had some shortness of breath for almost 2 weeks. That gradually got worse, and then I was kind of playing it safe, and then I was like, I wonder, is this just in my head? Like, because I've been doing a ton of high country rides.
Am I going to make clickbait and be like, Payson thinks he has COVID? And it's like straight clickbait, and everyone's going to click on it.
I don't know is the short answer, man, because I have no other symptoms. But long story short, I went for a couple of longer rides, and then I woke up the next morning, and my chest was just pretty painful. Couldn't take a deep breath, et cetera. Just completely put the bike away for 5 days. Didn't even look at it, let alone ride it. Well, maybe I looked at it a couple times, like, oh, this sucks.
Yeah.
But I spent all day at hospitals one day last week, just getting every test under the sun, chest x-ray, blood tests, EKG, all that sort of thing. Everything came back normal. Got a COVID test. Haven't heard back on that yet, but I would be very surprised if it were COVID, because I have absolutely no other symptoms. Yeah, and it's the breathing thing has already gone away. I'm actually after we finish recording, going to go for a super easy 2-hour ride here. But long story short, I am as unfit right now as I have been since the off season. And so what I'm going to be doing is, and you know how this is, when you have some forced time off, you get that low grade panic, like, oh no, my fitness is gone. And so I'm going to go back into full training mode a little bit and just get back to a baseline to where I feel like, should racing pick up again, I'm within striking distance of race form. So I'll be training pretty seriously again here starting soon. Other than that, honestly, the podcast takes up a ton of time. I just have too many projects, period. I mean, we're releasing a short film about the Everesting ride I did next week. So, that's 2 phone calls and 3 hours of emails a day. Oh, man. We have 2 other Stash TV episodes coming out in the next 6 weeks. So that's super full throttle. All kinds of stuff. And then some project ideas regarding bigger rides. That could be content pieces also. So there's always something going on. 2 to 3 too many irons in the fire, and I definitely need to work on work-life balance still. But that's kind of
one thing too, because it just hit me. I forget that everybody on this podcast doesn't have a van, but Pete Stetton has a van, You have a van. So just give us a breakdown of what your van is. Because my van is like, I got this like little mini cargo van. It's a Dodge ProMaster City cargo. It's like a single bed. I'm lucky to get me, the wife, the dog in there, a fridge. But your van, it's like the Mac Daddy. I mean, it's bees knees. Because you got it done at Van Life Customs, right?
They helped.
They helped.
They helped, but more from a consultation standpoint. My dad and I actually did all the build out together.
That's awesome.
Which is another kind of long story. I'll make it super short, but basically,
No,
I grew up going to races in a '87 Westfalia Vanagon with my mom and dad, and one day it just burned to the ground in a grocery store parking lot. Like there's a fuel leak, and it just like.
Jeez.
And so it was kind of sad. It was like losing a family member. And then I moved away, went to college, moved to Durango, all that sort of thing. And driving to races in vans wasn't a thing anymore, really.
Yeah.
And then van life really exploded. And I saw all of these people doing these really cool custom build outs themselves and learning how to do the builds themselves. Yeah. And it kind of struck me that my dad has all of these handyman skills. He knows how to run electrical, plumbing, everything, build cabinets. And when I was living at home as a teenager, I was always too busy to learn any of that from him, and had massive regrets about that. I was like, here's this guy with all of these skills, and I was always too cool to learn them from him. And now as a grown up, I really regret that. So I thought, you know what? I would love to get a van and use this as an excuse to drive it back home to Austin, see my parents, and learn all this tradesman stuff from my dad retroactively. And so that's what we did. And now I have this sweet van, and I learned a lot doing the build out. But yeah, Stetna, man, I'm starting to wonder about that guy because he has a mustache. He recently got a van. I'm like, dude, I know you're trying to integrate here into the grassroots, off-road racing scene, but might have to file a plagiarism lawsuit here soon.
What if he gets sponsored by Monster?
Oh,
just be
boy.
like, they just send it through the roof, right?
No, Stetton and I are good, and we chatted quite a bit about vans before he made the move on that one.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I love the van. It's been such a good lifestyle
for sure.
Investment for sure.
For sure. Well, hopefully we can get you on again, and hopefully we can maybe even get you in person, get a tour of the van, and just kind of check things out. But again, Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, Payson. Go out, enjoy your ride, and hopefully you're getting healthy. So cheers, man.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you having me. Keep up the good work.
Cheers. Bye.
Yep. Catch you later.